I did not have sexual relations with
And I
that
realize
woman.
that this is something
Miss
he is
Lewinsky.
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is BackFire.
Hey, welcome, Cleveland, to BackFire. Welcome this morning. Franklin Chansey's out of the building. He's gone to France this week, I think, or next 2 weeks. Anyway, he's going to be back in a few weeks, and I'm sure he's going to have a lot of things to tell us about the French government. What do you think, John?
I just hope he orders a Royale with cheese.
Hey, I want to welcome our special guest to take Franklin's place this morning, Mr. John Wolf Jr., from Chattanooga, Tennessee, an attorney down in Chattanooga, and quite a political person. He's been involved. He's run for president. How many times, John?
I ran in 5 primaries in 2012. Got 42% of the vote against Obama in Arkansas and 13% in Louisiana, and made a pretty good showing in Texas.
Didn't you beat the Texas convict that was running?
I'm sure I got more votes than everybody combined except for Obama in all the
Right.
primaries. I ended up with about 120 or 30,000 votes and did it on hardly any money. Didn't get one single radio ad, didn't buy one single TV ad. So, we did what we could, to try to speak up for the real Democrats, and which Obama is not.
Oh, yeah, that's another interesting question, John. Before you came in here, he was telling me he doesn't believe Obama is a Democrat. Go ahead, John.
Well, I just lay my premise out. He's done everything. He's financed by the military-industrial complex. He's financed by the bankers. Most of the advisors are from Wall Street. Jack Lew, for instance, has run the White House for a long time. You've had guys in there like Jack Welch from GE. Then you've had his underling, Jeff Immelt. I mean, they've had a lot of influence on Obama's policy. He's never really gone against what the bankers want. He's never really gone against what the military-industrial complex wants. He involves us in a lot of wars, gratuitous wars like in Libya. He's expanded drone strikes. He's basically laid waste to a lot of Afghan villages, killed a lot of innocent people. To me, that's not a Democrat. That's a warmonger taking money from bankers and other warmongers. And to me, that doesn't represent Democratic principles. Hillary Clinton is in line with that. She's the same way. I expect to oppose her in 2016.
Well, I may not agree on everything as far as what he is. I do agree. It was very hard for me both times as a Republican for our candidates, McCain and Mitt Romney, to be labeled as the candidate of Wall Street when Obama got more donations off Wall Street than either one of them did. He had more connections than either of our guys, and yet we were painted as the bad Wall Street guy, and he was painted as this independent guy. Now, John and I may disagree on where we ultimately would like the parties to go and the country to go, but I agree with him. This guy's a pretty good chameleon. He has one image that he's been able to sow, and part of that, one of the CEOs he's mentioned also owns CBS News. Well, they color the way they cover him. They help him present the image he wants to present, which is not the true image of him.
I agree 100%. I think he's gotten a ride from the press that way, and I think we have basically a corporate-driven media, and I don't think that he's been really looked at as close as he should. I mean, you think, too, on civil liberties. I mean, who's expanded more wiretaps than not George Bush? It's been Obama. Who's put more people in jail for telling the truth about what the government does? Obama. Bush prosecuted one person for telling the truth about what the government did relative to torture, wiretaps, things like that. Obama's put about 7 or 8 people in jail. His Justice Department has been just trying to keep a lid on free journalism and free information flow about government corruption.
Well, the Justice Department, you talk about a shambles. For what we as Americans have grown up to believe the Justice Department was supposed to stand for, this is a horrible Justice Department. They pick and choose who they prosecute, who they don't prosecute. For example, we put forward, now he was a very conservative thinker, but we put forward would have been the first Hispanic on the Supreme Court, and they just raked him over the coals because he wrote some of the memos on enhanced interrogation. Obama just put a guy forward for the federal court that wrote a memo on killing U.S. citizens, and nobody said a word. Now, we could argue over enhanced interrogation, but my point is, my goodness, even if you call it torture, it's not as extreme as killing people, and this guy got a free pass.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Obama certainly has changed. When he mentioned change, we got it. Have we gotten change with Obama?
Well, I don't think we have in a way. In a way, it's been a continuation of Bush's administration in some respects. I mean, here's the way I look at it. If you look at the bailouts, Bush was for that. You know, he wanted to make sure that the American auto industry was rescued. He wanted to rescue the banks. And we almost had to do it because we're just too beholden to those two things, our economy is. And we can't have Wall Street collapse, which it would have if the banks hadn't been bailed out. You got to remember, the first time, and I think everybody needs to know this is a very important point that's been forgotten. The first bill that went through to bail the banks out, when it failed, Wall Street dropped 785 points that afternoon. So that meant that everybody's retirement, everybody's source, you know, of not just retirement but just regular money, began to become in jeopardy because of the fact the government wasn't setting in or going out to stabilize the banking system. So if you don't uphold your major institutions, they're worldwide and important to the whole economy everywhere, then you're jeopardizing everybody.
Yeah, but the problem with that whole deal, though, is you can argue over whether and to be honest, the bulk of the opposition to that bailout was from the Republican right, because we you know, bankruptcy is there for a reason. And GM would have gone into bankruptcy. People would have bought those assets. Now, there's disruption and there's loss. I understand that. But it would have come back. But the real disgusting part of this is, irregardless of that argument, once you bailed them out, you should have fixed it to where you wouldn't have had to bail them out again. Every single bank that was too big to fail is bigger now than it was then. They didn't. Not only did they not fix it, they exacerbated the problem.
I agree 100%.
Well, there's some new laws coming about that seems to be making it a little harder to do business, but I don't know, maybe it's good. You know, it needs to go back to 20% down to buy
the
home.
Dodd-Frank bill is a disaster. It's helping the bank. It's helping the big banks, hurting the small community banks, and it's devastating small business owners who try to borrow money. These new rules, the new appraisal rules, is devastating to the building industry.
What do you think about having an agency that can set their own, they come in, do an investigation, set their own fines? In other words, they'll fine you whatever they feel like fining you.
Well, that can always be reviewed in a court. Now, we've got to remember one thing about banks. They've always really been socialized since the 1930s. You know, the bank is the only place, only business I know of where the government will guarantee your working capital. And therefore, people will put money in your institution because they know the government's behind it. So the risks and everything of banking have already been socialized. And not only that, you know, Obama never complained or made a lot of these people cut back on their salaries or anything like that after the bailout. These people, like my friend here said, they make more money now than they have before. I think before the recession, the top 5 banks had 53% of all the financial assets in the U.S. banking industry. Now it's up to about 67%. So so basically, the bailout helped capitalize failure and made failure bigger.
Well, you know, I've said this all along. Capitalism is not the problem. And we get in trouble because Republicans say we want to unregulate things. And they say, oh, well, that's what led to this. That's not what led to this, because unregulated capitalism, the public, the market determines where that goes. So if a company screws you over bad enough people over, people say, I'm not going to do business with that company, and that company suffers. And we've had huge corporations. We had huge shopping grocery stores in the 60s that were supposedly so big they were going to monopolize. Guess what? They're out of business. They screwed up. They went out of business. The problem is crony capitalism. It's when the government gets in bed with big corporations, because then we, the market, don't get to decide because the government passes a law that forces us to buy the product. Obamacare was part of that. The reason the big insurance companies were for Obamacare is because it was forcing you to buy their product. The reason Jeffrey Immelt was okay with, and Franklin gets all apoplectic over this, the curly Q bulbs, is because he owns GE. GE makes the bulbs, and when they outlaw the cheaper bulbs that we've all had for decades in our homes, we have to buy the more expensive bulb. We wouldn't buy that curly Q bulb if we could choose to continue to buy regular incandescent bulbs. The government forced us to do that.
Well, John, they're trying to save money. They're trying to save the electrical costs, even though that we're going to run the cost up with emissions control and everything else.
They're not trying to. That's the cover story.
Yeah,
they're trying to make money, and those bulbs cost more. Those bulbs actually don't last as long.
They're terrible.
Much worse in the landfill. Every point that they use to justify them is actually wrong, but they crammed it down our throats, and now we're buying a $7 bulb instead of a 40-cent bulb. What's your feeling of Obamacare, John Wolf?
Well, I agree. There's a couple of stocks that I would look at. One is Aetna. And before Obamacare was passed, which I think the date on that was 3/24/2010, Aetna was about a $36 stock. And Aetna is one of the huge health insurance companies that had a political hand in how Obamacare was formulated. Now, 4 years later, it's paid out about 10% of that amount in dividends. Plus, it's doubled. It's now $71 a share. The same thing happened to WellPoint, Healthcare America, some of these other stocks. They've all benefited because they have forced customers. The insurance company is a government-protected monopoly. There has been since 1947. And so they can actually work together to constrict prices to sector markets and do anything that a monopoly does. I mean, only they in baseball are protected monopolies by the government. But I just wanted to make one point now. The government, I think, has to proactively regulate in the financial area, because if you think about it, this whole mess in 2008 and 2009 was basically caused by a lot of trading of things that people didn't even know about. People were losing their jobs, their livelihood, their homes because of things like credit default swaps, unregulated mortgage derivatives, and things like that just went haywire, because the economy set in or had a bad time, and we had a lag in the housing market, and a lot of these things were sold, very sophisticated financial instruments, to people that didn't know any better. The credit ratings and things like that were inflated. They were really a whole lot more risky than they thought, and there was billions and billions of dollars put in that direction. And so people didn't know what they were buying, and when the market for a lot of these things collapsed, people were affected and lost, like I said, their homes and livelihoods for reasons they had no control over, reasons which we still don't even understand fully today. John, and that's just absolutely terrible.
I don't disagree that kind of stuff happened, but you're not going back far enough to fix the problem. Because if you go back to Jimmy Carter and the Community Investment Act, which forced these banks to make loans that should have never been made, you wouldn't have created the markets that you're talking about. The government went in. We've got a local bank. They wouldn't make a loan unless the person could come up with 20%. Well, the government regulators come in and they take a map and they put little push pins on the map and they go, look, you're not loaning enough in this part of town. This part of town is a minority area, so we're going to fine you if you don't make more loans. But the bank's going, look, we're not discriminated against anybody. We'll loan to anybody that comes up with the 20%. For us to go into that market, we've got to go above the or below the 20%. That's how you started getting 95%, 98% loans. At the first downturn in the economy, someone who only put up 2%, and sometimes negative percents, they can't rebound from that kind of downturn, and that's when the defaults started.
But see, we could have cured that problem, with probably about $100 billion if you just took the mortgages.
We could have cured that problem by not forcing the banks to do something they shouldn't have been doing.
They securitized all that. And, of course, they made securities and sold them all across the world. You see, the mortgage securities were bundled and then sold.
Freddie.
Well, no, that was part of it too, but also the banks themselves, they were pushing credit rating companies to give these packages they knew on Wall Street were ill and not well funded, They were pushing
But the
people
government
like
forced that, is my point.
No, that was Wall Street banks. They said, give us a good credit rating on these things so we can push them and sell them across the world, and
But
they
my
did.
point is,
And
had
then
the
we had an
government
international
forced the loans
financial
to be-
collapse because of Wall Street fraud, and that's
If
just
the
a fact. I mean,
government
you may
had-
not want to admit
no,
it.
I don't
but it
disagree
happened.
with you on
Yeah,
that. But
because
the point
Wall
is, if
Street
the
and
government
Washington
hadn't
are
forced the
one.
loans to be made in the first place, they wouldn't have been able to be packaged.
Well, the reason they were made is
Is to buy
it is true
votes.
that the government did not force it as much. And in fact, Bob Dole was behind it. Some Republicans were
Jimmy
too, because
Carter
it gave
passed
people a
it,
chance to be a
and then
homeowner.
Bill
It
Clinton
gave people,
really crammed it down
and
our
Bob Dole
throats.
did too. They were giving people a chance to be a homeowner. People who've been discriminated against for a long time in loans.
How they been
and things
discriminated
like that.
against?
Well, because a lot of times African Americans didn't get a chance to get equal credit, and they still don't. They have to pay higher interest rates. Their capital went down a lot
I mean,
more
they pay
than,
higher interest rates because of what?
well, because a lot of times whites don't want to buy into black areas, but blacks want to buy into white areas, talking about the same homes and kinds of neighborhoods. But because the demand for black area homes is lower, then of course you can't collateralize those homes as well, which means you can't get as much money into the black community.
Well, does it not?
So some of that
does
is
it
a
not have
vestige of
anything to do with it?
discrimination.
Does
But
it
when
not
the
have anything to
government's-
do with the credit rating?
Sometimes it does, but other times it doesn't. A
When
lot
the
of people.
government steps in, though, John, you distort the markets. When you distort the markets, you create the very problems you're talking
But the
about.
market is not a cult or a god. The market is what it is. It's good a lot of the times, and other
The
times
market
it has
is
to be
risk and
regulated.
return. And
It's-
if you have too much risk, you have to pay a higher return to get whatever it is you want out of the market. When the government steps in and says you're going to ignore risk and return ratios, you're going to do it because we think it's good social policy, that distorts the market, and that's what leads to these bubbles that collapse.
But let's look what the banks actually really did. They went to a lot of people in these rural communities where there was a lot of equity in their homes and had them sign contracts and things to get a lot of cash up front. They were faced with terms they really didn't understand that well. They had quicker default clauses and things like that, higher interest rates.
Now, wait a
If they
minute,
missed a couple of payments,
let me-
they'd kick in to where their interest rates would double. This sort of thing is
Let me-
not fair, and it should be regulated.
I don't disagree, but
that
it was the
market
government
greed.
forcing
Market
the banks
greed.
to go into those neighborhoods in the first
No,
place.
they didn't. They didn't
John,
do
they
it.
came
You
up
are-
here to local banks and actually put push pins in the map and said, you've got to make more loans over here. That's the problem.
The rate of black home ownership is much less than it is for white.
It may be,
homeowners.
Well,
but you
wait a minute,
can't
there's a
afford-
reason for
there's
that.
a reason
You
for
can't
that.
blame the recession on the government trying to
Wait a
give.
minute.
You're trying to make blacks again, just like
No,
Republicans
look,
always have.
if
You're
you
trying to
look
make
at
blacks
numbers, there's
the
more
cause of
poor
something. You're
whites
trying
in
to
this
make the
country
people
than
who have the
blacks.
least wealth and the least power
There's more
the
poor
cause of
whites
a
in this
worldwide
country
recession.
than
You
poor
can't do
black.
it. The facts
There's
don't support
numbers
it.
are
Wait a minute.
more
Wait a
poor
minute.
whites
Yeah.
than black.
I want
No,
to. I want to
that's not
hear
true.
this a little
Not
bit.
percentages, total numbers.
Say again what you just said.
I said he's trying to blame the most politically powerless people and the ones with least wealth relative to anybody
The ones
in
that
the
don't.
sector.
The ones that
For the whole economic meltdown
I'm not blaming
in
them
the
at all.
world. The
I
whole
blame
world
the
what
government.
was
I
because
didn't
blacks
blame
got
them.
too many
I
loans.
blame-
They
no.
always want to blame
Well,
the
first
blacks.
off, I
Blame the
didn't
blacks.
interject race
Blame the
into
blacks
this
for what?
conversation.
just
You did.
You
No, I
did.
didn't. I
Yes,
never
you did.
mentioned blacks.
You said blacks shouldn't have
No,
gotten
I
loans
did
from
not.
the banks. Yes,
I
you did.
did
You
not
said the
say
government
that.
forced.
John, you
said
know I didn't
Carter
say
did,
that.
and
What
then
I
you
said
Clinton
was
did.
they
And
forced them
Dole was
into
for it, and so
neighborhoods
was
that
Bush.
couldn't meet
Yeah,
the
you're trying to play the race
responsibilities.
card. You're
No,
trying to play the
you
race
played
card
the
again,
race
John.
card. Y'all
I
always
wish
do.
Franklin was here.
You'll always
Playing the race card,
Anytime
John.
anybody puts a fact out there that
No.
doesn't suit you, you
No.
throw the race card out.
No, you did that. You were trying to make Clinton and Carter look like they were trying to help
Clinton and
low-income
Carter
black people get
forced
too
the
much
community
more than they
investment
deserve.
act
It's the
down
black
our
people's
throat,
fault
and it
again.
led to the bubble.
Let's calm down here. Just a minute. Now, let's just go back to one person, Clinton. Clinton did put something together where he wanted more people to have the American dream and get a home. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, more people to have the American home. Then it came down and they started easing the standards. You didn't have to have 20% anymore. You could have less money, right? Am
Well,
I right?
They did
Am I
that
right?
for they did that for a little while.
Oh, okay.
For just a
Good.
bit.
So you could have less money. Now then, after you had less money, the appraisals weren't enough because they got to the point they were trying to get it with no money. So next thing you know, the appraisals started going through the roof. And the appraisals were 20% higher than they should have been.
And those appraisals were done by private people wanting to get money off commissions off loans.
I don't disagree with any of that. My point is, if the government hadn't stuck their nose in the market in the first place, you wouldn't have opened the door for these people to do what they did.
We got to remember, too, there's another thing that we haven't talked about. There's a big difference in the economy between the 90s when a lot of these loans were made, and then when we started having some downturns around 2000 and 2001. People who had just gotten into the job market a lot of these people were the last ones hired in, the last ones to see the prosperity of the 90s. And when our economy changed, they were the first ones to go in the new decade. And so then they were faced with mortgage contracts that were pretty rigid. Once you missed one or two payments, your interest rates doubled, or there was acceleration clauses, and there were a lot of defaults and stuff.
Well,
and so that's absolutely
the poor really are not the bulk of the reason it collapsed. My point is, this is sort of rolling a little snowball down a hill, and it gets bigger and bigger. My point is, once you started lowering whatever your justification, you said, we want this group to get more homes, so we're going to lower the down payment. We're down to 5%. Well, then you can't deny someone else. So then you got people buying $500,000 and $600,000 and $700,000 homes with 5% down. Those were the big homes that, when the economy turned down, that went under, that really blew the bubble up. So my point is not this group or that group. My point is government meddled in the market. The market has equilibrium. When the government steps in and meddles in it, they tip the equilibrium, and that's what leads to these big problems.
Well, it's just that people didn't have the money to pay it back, because the economy went bad. They shouldn't have been borrowing it in
the first place.
Well, no, they had jobs when they borrowed. They weren't the credit risks that you say they were, because the economy was on the upswing. By 1999, the unemployment rate was down to about 4%. And incomes were going up, actually above the rate of inflation. And at that point, there were blue skies. But then around the turn of the century,
if we had still had an 80% requirement, you wouldn't have had the bubble.
You still would have had the securitization. They still would have taken the mortgages and sold them.
Probably
and
so.
They would have been, the same thing would have happened.
But with a 20% down rule in place, you would have had much fewer people going under. Well, the going under is what caused the bubble to burst.
Well, yeah, I don't think so. I think when you take all those packages and you sell them to people, and you have international investors buying stuff that's rated as AAA or AA plus, and it's really not. And Wall Street, the private entities of Wall Street, knowingly, and it's been proven time and again, they knowingly package these securities at a risk level that's undisclosed except to them. And the fact they were actually buying puts, which means that they get a profit when the price of these things go down. In other words, they were betting against their own products because they knew their products were fraudulent and infested with fraud. So they were making money on the downside when those things collapsed. A lot of people made a lot of money in the housing market because it went down.
I don't disagree with any of that. My point is the government shouldn't have meddled in the first place, and you wouldn't have had the
but that's just a race card.
That's
again trying to
blame
once
again,
blame the most politically powerless.
You're the one injecting
race.
I didn't even
poorest
mention
people
race.
For the greatest economic crash since the Great Depression.
White
it always
people
comes back.
made bad loans than blacks total. So I didn't interject race. You did.
Poor,
because you can't argue.
What can we do to help the poor people?
Back on a race argument.
What can we do to help the poor people that don't want to stay poor?
Yeah, it's one way to judge the poor.
Do you think we ought to give them more unemployment?
I think what we need in this country is simply this. We're going to have to raise taxes on the well-to-do who benefited by this economy, because the very things that make people rich, things like free trade agreements, weak unions, and those sorts of things, low taxes, are the same things that are making people poor.
Well, because they unions made Detroit completely poor.
No.
Yeah. What happened to Detroit? They had everything. They had all the Democrats.
The suburbs of Detroit still do. You notice they're getting ready to build a new $2 billion stadium, and it's being paid for by the people out there.
So, in other words, you're saying the unions are racist because they only devastated the black communities.
The unions didn't do anything wrong.
Yes, they did. They devastated the inner city, which is what you just did to me. The unions must be racist because they hurt the black community.
Yeah, blame the people whose wages have been cut by a third. Again, he wants, just like Republicans do, blame the powerless.
I want to hear what you got to say about Detroit.
The unions, I'll simply tell you this. In 1979, when the auto industry collapsed, and this is irrefutable history. The unions were the first ones to make concessions. Chrysler had to be bailed out. So the unions took a pay cut because Chrysler mismanaged during the 1970s. They didn't make cars that people wanted. They kept making what were fuel-efficient things that eventually didn't have a market for them.
General Motors did the same thing.
I can finish this.
General Motors did the same thing.
They got a bailout. Not only did they get it, and they got bailed out too indirectly. So you had Lee Iacocca come upon the scene. He took credit for everything, but it was really us, the people, that rescued the whole business. Not only did we give them a bailout in the loans, the unions took the pay cuts, and they also had to put into place a voluntary quota from Japan. Reagan did this, where the Japanese quit selling their cars, so the Americans were basically, or they didn't quit selling their cars. They had to sell their cars at higher prices. And so therefore, people were left to buy American. They were basically forced to. And then they claimed Iacocca was a hero when we really bailed him out.
You're making my argument. Government distorted the market. They should have stayed out of it and left it alone, and the market would have fixed it.
Well, but then we wouldn't have had an auto industry. I mean,
Yes,
there's reasons.
would.
There's
Fiat,
reasons
Fiat
for
went
military
broke
production.
Fiat
things
went
like
broke
that. You've
in
got to
Europe,
have
and someone
a
else
steel
bought the
and auto
plants,
industry.
reopened it, and those jobs came back. Every time a industry collapses, another industry takes its place. That's what capitalism is.
But
That's
these
the
are-
beauty of America.
It's not a free market country. by
I
the way.
agree. We should be a more
But
free market. If we were
the
more
thing is,
free market,
those
we
are
would fix
strategic-
these
Yeah,
problems.
it's easy to say that when you're not the one losing the job.
Let
and
me-
you're talking
let me
about
ask you-
strategic industries, steel and
Let me ask you
transportation.
something. Let me ask you something. How can we fix the economy right now?
The only way to do it right now would be to infuse a lot of money into public works to rebuild the infrastructure. America compared
That's
to
what
China,
that's what
compared
Mr.
to
Obama-
China and Germany, we've got very little infrastructure.
That's what
improvement
Mr.
going on.
Obama wants to do, correct?
Well, I can't disagree with him every time.
Well-
But that's the way you build it. I mean,
Could
we did
we-
it during the
That's
30s.
not how you build an
We
economy.
did it during the 30s. Ronald Reagan's dad
The
worked for
economy
WPA.
in the 30s, that was the worst recovery until Obama's.
Well-
Every recovery, major economic recovery before FDR, recovered faster and stronger. His policies made it worse, not better.
You feed people before they starve and you make them worse.
Could we not just give all the employers in America a tax credit for every employee they hired?
They already do. I mean, you
I mean,
deduct your
could we not do
employees.
that
The
right
highest
now?
corporate tax
rather
rate
than-
in the world right now.
Could we not do that rather than to feed more dollars into a system of government waste where you're giving it away?
But see, the thing
Let's
about
look
it-
at the
yeah,
VA system.
yeah.
Are you for the VA hospital system?
Well, I think it could be done better. But you got to remember, too, right now in this country, as far as employment goes, our GDP is growing, the stock market's growing, the value of capital is growing, but we're doing it with a lot fewer people because of technology and things like that, because of because of the way we do our business and these free trade agreements and everything else. So people that own businesses and the stocks are doing better, but there's not as much work for people to do. I mean, you've got a real unemployment rate of about 12%. Now, on the other hand, you've got businesses that have $2 trillion in cash on the sidelines. You've got businesses that are growing at huge rates. I mean, the stocks are proof of that. So you're able
would
to
you
produce
just
more
force those
stuff.
companies
Right
to
now, the
spend that
problem
money?
is that you're able to get more stuff out there with fewer people. And so people have kind of become a surplus. It's not that people are lazy. You know, they had a Walmart store open in Washington. They had 23,000 people. Washington, D.C., 23,000 people applied for 600 jobs. But there's just not enough work to go around. So the only way to do that is you've got to build the infrastructure. And to do that, you need to put a progressive income tax, a wealth tax on the people that own over $1 million, tax them at 1 or 1.5%, and make them pay for
France
this,
did
because they're
that,
the
and
ones
their
that made
total
all
revenue
this
went
money
down.
because of government deregulation,
France did that,
deregulating
John,
trade,
and
and
their
everything else.
total
They have made
revenue went
huge
down.
amounts of money in the stock
Explain that.
market.
France did just what you wanted them to do, and their total revenue actually decreased because
Yeah.
all the rich people left the country.
They won't leave the United States and
We've got companies
taxes
leaving.
are still lower
Merck
than they
is
are in
getting
Europe.
ready to
The
move.
United States has
Merck
the
is
lowest
getting
tax
ready to
rate
move
for rich
right
people
now.
in the Western world. We have the lowest tax rate, the lowest number, the tax collections relative to GDP, lowest in the Western world. Tax
That's
rate on
because we wanna have the
corporations,
highest-
the
one of the
effective
highest
tax rate, the
GDPs.
lowest
That's a BS
corporate tax rate of
statistic, and you know
12%
it.
in the whole Western
is a
world.
BS
We give
statistic, and
away
you know
stuff
it.
to people. Look how we give away stuff to Volkswagen. That happens all across the United States. Giveaways to business to do this, that, and the other. We beg for jobs. It's a human right to work. We don't have to kiss Volkswagen's butt. We shouldn't have to. The community that didn't get Volkswagen deserves the jobs just as much as we do. Just because they didn't throw an extra $10 million at somebody doesn't mean those people in that community shouldn't work too. You know, people have a right to work.
Well,
They're
what are you
human
gonna
rights.
do? Are you gonna
human
force-
rights,
are
just
you
like
gonna
Abraham Lincoln
force
said, human
Volkswagen to
rights
do what
are
you want?
superior to capital
Are
rights.
you going to force VW to do what you want? Is that your solution?
No, I think they should.
Fascism, communism, which do you
He
want?
wants
We already
unionism.
have that. You know, you have you have government and industry working hand
I'm
in hand.
arguing
which is
against
already
that.
fascism.
You just don't like the way they're controlling the companies. I don't want them controlling the companies. I want the government out of it.
Well, yeah, then you'll just have another Great Depression like you did during the 1930s.
We've got one right now. It's Obama's Great Depression.
Well, it's the Great Recession.
It's
and
the
we're still
worst
not out of
recovery
it.
in the history of the country.
Well,
and
that's
he did exactly what you wanted. He dumped a bunch of money in, and we got absolutely nothing for it.
Relative to the economy, he dumped very little in. The Republicans restricted.
So
it
your
from
argument
spending
is
more.
we should have spent more money on it.
The Republicans were fighting.
So
for
in
that
other
money.
words, we
They
did what you
They
wanted.
said it was good when it
failed,
came to their,
and it wasn't that it's a failed policy. It's just that we didn't do big enough. My opinion is you just have an even bigger failure.
No, when the recession happened, business froze.
Well,
Face
Reagan
it,
did the
they quit
opposite, and the
hiring,
economy came
everybody
back,
got
and it
afraid.
came back faster
what
and
you
stronger.
do, everybody since 1900 has known that once when business freezes, when they get scared, capital freezes, the government's got to come in and get the economy going again.
Government
That doesn't mean
is
the
the
government
problem.
owns anything.
Government
We have the
is the
weakest
problem.
regulatory sector in the whole Western world. Business
it
gets away with
stifles
everything.
business. That's
I mean,
one of the
already
reasons
Obama's
businesses aren't
giving BP
expanding.
contract rights in the Gulf after what they did in April of 2010. Their subs are drilling all over the place. Nobody's restricting them. He's basically done everything businesses ask him to do. He's a corporate Democrat.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You need money overnight? Check into cash. Your time is tight. .com. Bank account's too low? Check into cash. So where do you go? .com. Do it online in a record time. It's the easy way to get money next day. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. Just stay in the house, check into cash, and grab your mouse.com. Get your money online, check into cash, right on time.com. You can be sure it's secure from our bank straight to yours. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. No time to get away, check into cash. You gotta stay home.com. Hey, that's okay, check into cash. You can do it alone.com. Any old time, do it online. Just stay in the house and grab your mouse. Do a quick click from home. Get your money overnight at the right website. Do a quick click from home. Go to checkintocash.com.
Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy or sell or apply today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Rebel Drive-In Family Restaurant. The restaurant you grew up with here in Cleveland, Tennessee, located at 1010 South Lee Highway. Give them a call at 476-6373. They have a wonderful, huge breakfast, lunch, and dinner menu. It's the home of the famous Lotta Burger, and now a whole lot more. It's open every day except Monday. Yes, now even open on Sunday. Same menu, but new low prices. And don't forget, seniors, a discount on every Wednesday. Check out the home of the famous Lotta Burger and a whole lot more now at the Rebel Drive-In, 476-6373. Check out rebeldrivein.com. The Rebel Drive-In. Calvin's Flea Market. It's the grand opening bash. That's right, Saturday, May the 31st from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's the grand opening bash at Calvin's Flea Market here in Cleveland at 2355 South Lee Highway, just across the street from the Cleveland Speedway. You can call them at 284-7120. That's 284-7120. The grand opening bash will have the Whoop live remote. Pro Daddy and Matador, check us out. Hourly giveaways, live music, and much more. It's the indoor-outdoor, rain or shine. That's everything under the sun or in the rain flea market, including Big Daddy's dogs, just in case you're hungry, with over 20 current vendors, and there's room for more. If you'd like to get a booth and be a vendor, call now if you're interested. There's new items, wholesale to the public, including all kinds of used and gently owned items. Calvin's Flea Market here in Cleveland at 2355 South Lee Highway. Don't miss the grand opening bash, the Whoop live remote with Pro Daddy and Matador, hourly giveaways, live music, and much more. Saturday, May 31st, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
If you're looking for a home, apartment, or office space, Jones Properties provides residential and commercial properties in the heart of the Southeast that will fulfill any need. Plus, Jones Properties is one of the fastest growing firms in the area, which offers you more security. When you're ready for a home, apartment, or in need for commercial office space, it makes sense to call Jones Properties first at 472-4000. Plus, you can get additional information by logging on to the website at www.jonesproperties.biz. Jones Properties is also looking to invest in properties. So if you have a property that you need to sell, call the professional team at Jones Properties first. They'll help you find the perfect property for whatever your needs. Call today, 472-4000. And don't forget to keep up with Jones Properties on Facebook.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, welcome back to Backfire with John Wolf out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and John Stanberry. I've got the two Johns in here. Franklin's out of town this week. I want to switch just a little bit and talk about Volkswagen in Chattanooga. I know you're familiar with that and the union issue and so forth. What's your opinion of that, John?
Well, I mean, Volkswagen has a way of doing business. I mean, the management seems to want a union. The people do too. Or, well, the people voted against it. The workers did. And so, I mean, you have to stand by what they've done.
Okay.
The thing about it is I think that there was a lot of pressure put on, the governor.
Was there any pressure put on it from the union side?
Well, yeah, the union has the right to try to organize. And Bob Corker came in there, and Corker said that if people voted against the union in 30 days, they would announce a new plant
that was
location,
his opinion.
and that hasn't happened.
Well.
And so they it probably was an unfair vote. You really can't bring pressure on people like that.
But now, wait a minute, John. Let me ask you
Let
a
me
question.
just finish for a minute.
Well,
he came in, he made a false promise, and the people haven't gotten the second line of cars that Corker promised they would get if they voted against the union. So obviously pressure, unfair vote. It wasn't done in the right
John,
circumstances.
what was the opposition allowed to do then? If you can't make any comments, if you can't argue with them,
they
weren't allowed in the plant.
The
union was allowed in the plant. They were even allowed the addresses of the workers. Why would the union be allowed all of that access and the opposition people were not? Explain that.
Well, I can explain it very well. Grover Norquist was down here. They contacted people by
they weren't given any help by the plant. The plant gave the union access, and they didn't give the opposition access. Now, tell me why that's fair.
A lot of the supervisors were wearing T-shirts, the anti-union T-shirts. So
that
were a lot
was
of the middle
choice.
management. Grover Norquist spent $125,000 or more on billboards and anti-union ads. They had plenty of representation.
We're a free country
to get their sides out. Yeah, exactly. So
well,
I mean, both sides were represented. But when you say that somebody's not going to get a new line of work if they vote for the union,
that was his opinion.
That is the sort of when you had the U.S. senator saying that.
Well, that was
and then
his opinion.
Then we found out that Haslam withdrew $318,000 or $318 million
in
tax incentives. He was getting ready to do that unilaterally if people voted in the union. To me, that is wrong. You can't do that kind of stuff. All that stuff came out a little bit later.
Why is the manufacturing industry dead in Detroit if it wasn't cost from the unions?
Well, the reason is because people. It's not really the union's fault because they had cut their wages and things like that.
How much higher were they than the other non-unionized plants?
No, the Detroit,
were they still significantly higher than
every time
non-unionized
management
plants?
in Detroit? Every time management wants a cut in pay or benefits,
were
they always give it
higher
to
than
them.
non-unionized plants?
Can they live with the benefits they get for the rest of their lives and retire it?
Well,
Let's say
the
50.
management made a deal back when times were good, and then times soured, and the union still backtracked on their agreement to their own detriment and agreed to make concessions. They've done that in every situation because they want to save their jobs. They're American people
It's
that
real
want to work.
simple, John. If one guy's willing to work for less than another guy, the company's just common sense. The job goes to the guy that was willing to work for less. The unions overpriced their service, and they went out of business. That's simple
the
as it
economic
is.
circumstances changed.
Well, and you know what? Life changes. The horse and buggy industry went out of business when the automobile was invented. Life changes, and you have to move with it.
Well, that's easy to say when you've got all the money in the world. These people here
well, guess who doesn't have all the money in the world? The bondholders from Detroit, because the president stole their contractual bond payment and gave it to the unions. Now, you explain how that's fair.
Yeah.
A bondholder signed a contract, had a legal document saying he was not an owner, not a stock. This was a bond. So, in other words, they loaned money. The president unilaterally went in and said, we're going to take your bond money and we're going to give it to the union for the pension fund. Explain how that was fair to the bondholders.
The unions everybody took a haircut. The unions took a pay cut. The unions
bondholders
took a benefit
took
cut.
scalping.
And the bondholders also got
how many of those bondholders were old retirees living on fixed incomes? Was that fair to take their money that they were contractually owed and give it to the unions?
Well, the unions don't lose in every case. Every now and then they do get a benefit or two.
So, in other words, you're okay with all those bondholders losing
I
millions
wasn't there
of dollars.
when the deal was made.
Well, what about the fact that AC Delco, the only non-union supplier up there in Detroit, took an actual cut while the union employees did not? Explain that.
They did
comparison.
take a cut. That's where you're wrong.
They took nothing like AC Delco lost everything.
I'm glad I saw Angela Merkel. You know, the people in Germany make 70% more than our workers here in the United States.
Then
the United States manufacturers,
then go live in Germany.
They have
Feel free to move to Germany.
They have better wages. They have better education. They have a better healthcare system.
Then move to Germany,
lives,
John.
And they're all unionized. They're all
Feel
unionized.
free to move over there and be happy.
Man. You admit
Feel
that this
free to move to Germany and be happy.
That gives
the
people
entire
higher standards of
European
living.
Union
they
is
have higher
collapsing
standards
in
of
your
living.
sight.
And they have unionization.
It is collapsing
and they
as
have
we look
universal
at it.
health care.
All right. Got one quick question about that. They're talking about spending $1.85 billion on a renewal plan for bankrupt Detroit. Are you for or against that, John Wolf?
Well, I think that they should do what they can to save the city, but I think it's the people, I think it's the people in the suburbs of Detroit who are getting these new stadiums built and everything, who work in Detroit that make money off Detroit, that they should contribute to a lot of that.
So, are you saying that the taxpayers in Tennessee shouldn't help underfund or fund a rebuilding of Detroit?
Yeah, I think that's something that we bailed out New York. I guess Ford did.
We shouldn't have bailed New York. We
1976.
shouldn't have bailed any of these people out. The Republicans oppose these kind of bailouts because what you're doing is you're two things: you're rewarding failure and you're distorting the market forces.
Let's take a phone call.
Bush was for a bailout.
Well, I'm against that.
Let's take a phone call if we still got one. Go ahead, caller. You're live. We've lost him. Okay, let's move on.
All right.
The VA. Hot topic right now.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
What do you think about the VA system?
Well, the VA system has been underfunded for a long time, and because
the funding has gone up significantly.
I have worked with
more
veterans
than doubled.
but you have a lot more people coming back with very serious injuries.
John, let me ask you something.
But
why do we need a VA system?
We have hospitals.
Why can't we use any hospital in America?
Well,
why can't we give them the same insurance plan as our congressmen?
Well, what we could do is just give them Medicare.
Yes.
Let them pay into a system based on their income.
The system is already set up. Why don't we just go close the doors to the VA system, which is totally
sell the assets.
Sell the assets, get rid of it, take some of it, and maybe convert it to some therapy or something, but just dissolve the VA system and put it into our regular hospital system.
That would not be a bad idea.
Well, that's actually been available since before World War II, and we've done it. There's actually a line item for that. That's why this administration is so incompetent. He took 4 weeks to decide one little comment, basically, on the VA. He could have immediately taken those backlog lists, authorized them to go to regular private hospitals and to be paid. There's already a line item for it. So why did he make them wait 4 weeks? Because he's looking at the political optics of this. Everything is political with this president. It's all about him and his image and what he wants the public to think.
Let me tell you, in 2012, an audit by the VA Inspector General found that the agency's hospitals lacked a method for calculating the staffing needs, in part because of the resistance to measuring the worker productivity. Now then, most of the vet hospitals are union.
It's the most heavily unionized section of the government.
Now then, under that system, the unions, the bigger the budget, the better for them. They get to hire more people. They get to do things. They had an opportunity to send patients out to other hospitals, and they wouldn't do it. They kept them in-house.
Well, the Republicans put a bill forward to allow them to fire these people that had, I think, criminally done bad things to the veterans. And Bernie Sanders, the independent, basically socialist in the Senate, was the spokesman for the Democrat Party and said, no, we need to take time to read this. Now, it's a 3.5-page bill, and he needed time to read it. They didn't need time to read a 1,400-page Obamacare bill.
The VA is an easy system to fix. Let's take a phone call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Good morning, Steve, and the two Johns. How you doing?
Hey.
Good morning.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I just got a real comment and a question for the guys. Whoever becomes a president, I think they're going to have a chore. They're going to have to rebuild their military. And I'm just wondering what's their opinion on this guy that they swapped 5 Taliban terrorists for one soldier, which I've been getting some conflicting reports that he was a deserter.
That's the best case scenario. He was possibly a collaborator with the Taliban.
Yeah, my opinion is, I don't believe they should have swapped 5 terrorists for him, but on the bright side about this is, if they start doing something again, maybe we can blow them away this time, but I just want to hear you guys, and I'll hang up and listen to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, one thing about the VA, I'll tell you real quick, and I'll get to that question. Is if you just had single payer health care, there wouldn't be an issue here.
You'll have the VA if you have single payer. The VA is single payer.
It works in every other country. They have lower costs than we do.
It works.
Germany has half the cost we do.
The waiting list in Canada for a heart cath, which is a test, is 6 months. So, folks, if you want to wait 6 months to even have a test, by all means, go with single payer.
That's not true. Germany, they have half the cost we do, longer life expectancy, better education, and all that. And unions too. But anyway, as far as this guy here,
you're making an excellent case for your move to Germany, John.
No,
move.
Yeah,
if it's so wonderful,
learn by example. We don't know everything, but anyway,
actually, we've led the world for 200 years.
No, Germany out exports us.
Saved their butts multiple times. They'd all be speaking. We'd all speak German right now. Not for us.
A country of 70 billion out exports a country of 300 million.
I'm really sorry that you're ashamed of your own country, but if you love Germany so much,
you just
move
love
to Germany.
Wealth. You love privatization.
No,
wealth.
I love
you have it
free
all.
enterprise.
You want to keep what you've got.
Free enterprise built this country.
No, it did not. The government helped at every step of the way.
Who
paid for the 7th cavalry? Who paid for the 7th cavalry?
All through the 18th century or 1800s.
Who paid for the 7th cavalry?
The 10th Amendment was the deciding factor on almost all congressional bills. It wasn't until FDR stacked the courts, broke the back, and we have ignored the 10th Amendment for decades now.
Yeah, John Marshall didn't even
explain the 10th Amendment to me.
Yeah, we'll do that after we
explain
talk about
the 10th Amendment to all of us. How does that work?
I could do that very easily. John Marshall already told you what it meant, and we agree with John Marshall.
In other words, John Marshall, one unelected guy, decided to change the direction of the entire nation.
McCulloch versus Maryland. Thomas Jefferson agreed and did Louisiana Purchase, which was he used unenumerated powers to get that land to expand the country. It's a settled case. Only people bring it up who want to keep the wealth. You use the 10th Amendment as a whipping post to keep people down. So anyway, this guy here, if the war, the Taliban used to run Afghanistan, so a lot of these people were actually in Afghanistan as people who were in government between 96 and 2000.
I will agree on that.
So they, if the war ends, the war ends, you let people go, right?
The war's not over.
The war's just about over. We're supposed to be winding it down. There's going to be negotiations.
One of them was a Taliban Minister of Interior, Taliban Minister of Defense, Taliban Minister of Intelligence, senior military commander, and the governor of one of the provinces. 2 of them are wanted for war crimes at the UN, and we traded all of them for a traitor.
Well, some of them might have been invited by Bush to Texas in 2000 when the Taliban were over there and they wanted to do a Unicol pipeline through Afghanistan. When the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, we were curry in favor to try to get oil lines, and so then we had a fight because we alleged that they hid Osama bin Laden.
John Wolf, you're an attorney.
Yeah.
Did Mr. Obama do anything wrong?
Did he do anything wrong?
Did he not? Should he not have given Congress the 30-day?
Yeah, he should
notice?
have. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, they discussed it back and forth.
So
he should have gone by what the law was.
Does he take an oath to uphold the Constitution?
I mean, he should have. I'm not here to defend Obama.
Did he violate his congressional oath?
I think he should have given the Congress the 30 days.
So
what do you think should happen?
Well,
Mr.
we used
Obama
to impeach
now?
people for.
Well, he's got his term. He'll have a tough time the next 2 years. Probably the Republicans may gain a little bit of ground in these upcoming elections, and there are a lot of issues that seem to be running against him, and this isn't going to help him here. Well, but we have done this before. I mean, toward the end of every war, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the most activist presidents there was. But the people involved in the Filipino insurgency, we pardoned them, and they had committed crimes against the U.S. occupying force.
We've never
we did the same
with
thing. Well, they were insurgents at the time. We call them terrorists.
And Teddy Roosevelt did an agreement with them. He signed a treaty with them, and that was part of the treaty. This was a negotiation with terrorists where we basically paid a ransom. And by the way, the Haqqani network has never done this. They got nothing out of this. All of this goes to the Taliban. The Haqqani network's about 20% Taliban. The rest of it's non. So most of the time when they do this, it's over money. I will guarantee you within the next week, 2 weeks, we will find out that there were money transfers involved with this as well.
Let's take a call.
Yeah, I don't think so on that.
Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Yeah, on this, you're talking about the letting these Gitmo go, and talking to terrorists. What I thought of he done was, I don't know what the ruler of Afghanistan's name is, but he had said he would not sign any papers to allow any troops to remain in that country. He said that over and over. When they pull out, they take everything with them. And then Obama goes over there, and then all of a sudden this comes up, and I believe the ruler of the Afghanistan was the middleman in this, or you have to release them before I'll sign papers to allow any troops to remain in our country.
Well, no, actually, this may have endangered a troop agreement because the president of Afghanistan right now is not part of the Taliban. The Taliban will destroy him if they could. We didn't even consult with him. We didn't even tell him we were going to do this. So basically, Obama has pulled the rug out from under him. Now, you're right. He was arguing with us over troop placements, but he's also been voted out of office effectively. So we'll have a new president. But the White House didn't notify them either. So they've pulled the rug out from under the current government of Afghanistan because these guys, the Taliban, will immediately begin fighting the current government.
Well, they had a civil war in Afghanistan between 93 and 95, and they had another one, I think, between 89 and 92. These people have been fighting each other. There's even factions in the Taliban that fight each other. Some people are Islamists, some are communists. Afghanistan has a lot of different factions that are wanting power.
Well, they've been fighting
for a long
centuries,
time.
actually.
The Taliban ran Afghanistan. Some of the Taliban were in Texas in 2000 on oil leases and contracts and things like that. And so the Taliban, they do have some political support, just like the Viet Cong had lots of political support inside South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So they're a force to be reckoned with. And that's for sure. And if you're going to have a peace treaty, you're going to have to, and to say that they're terrorists,
they are terrorists.
Terrorists are people who are interested in trying to blow up New York City skyscrapers. I say we destroy.
These guys blew
hold
up
on,
our
let
troops.
me finish my thought. If they actually have the capacity and the intent to do that, then we should go after them. But now, if these people are just people who are trying to rebel against the U.S. puppet government, which is Hamid Karzai, then they have every right to do so. And so there's a difference between being against who the U.S. puppet is and trying to blow up New York City skyscrapers.
Actually, the reason we went in there originally was because we said these people were part of the bombing of our trade
but
centers.
They didn't know anything about it. I don't think any of those guys
Obama's the one that
knew
said this was the right war and the good war,
hey,
which
caller,
means they were against us.
Yeah, but he's wrong
you
about that,
stirred things
too.
up here, caller.
One more quick comment, okay?
All right, go ahead.
The military soldier has to take an oath to defend the Constitution, foreign and domestic, I think. I don't know exactly how it goes. The president has to take an oath to basically do the same thing with the Constitution. Well, if he's violating the Constitution, like some say, Democrats and Republicans, is that not cause to impeach him?
Well, actually,
Thanks, caller. We'll talk about it.
The president of Harvard, who is a right or left-wing liberal Democrat, huge supporter of Obama originally, actually talked about that just last night, I believe, on the news, and said he clearly broke the law, and he said that these things matter, and they actually mentioned the idea of impeachment. This wasn't radical right-wing people. These are left-wing liberals talking about he's violating the law, violating the Constitution. Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington University. I know Jonathan, went to school with him. He's extremely liberal, but he said this guy has broken the law on regular occasions. Every change he's done to Obamacare has been an actual violation of federal law.
Well, every president seems to violate the law these days. Bush started a war that was illegal.
That was not.
Bush wiretapped. There's no question that
apples
Bush.
And oranges, and
Bush wired. Well, we lost $3 trillion and 4,000
We're
people.
talking about laws on
yeah,
the
he
book
did. Yeah,
that
I agree that
purposely
Obama
disagreed.
and Clapper broke the law when he testified that there wasn't any dragnet surveillance or metadata surveillance on the American people. The intelligence people have lied to Congress. It seems to be, that people are doing this all the time now. And of course, Bush wiretapped without any authority. He broke the FISA law by wiretapping people here domestically that he had no warrant for against that law. So, really, we need to hold everybody to the same standard. And if we did, a lot of presidents would be impeached. Unfortunately, lawlessness seems to be.
So is that your defense?
Unfortunately, lawlessness seems to be the order of the day with everybody.
Well, we impeached Clinton and nothing happened.
Well, we could. That's a long story right there.
Well, he committed perjury. He was impeached because he committed perjury.
Yeah, that's like saying, I was going to Judge. I was
did
going 20.
Did he commit perjury?
Did
he commit perjury?
If I told Judge
yes
Sharp,
or no, did he commit perjury?
No, I don't think that he.
So he lied in oath in a federal court, but that's not perjury.
Okay, if I told
you're a court officer, right?
If I was in front of Judge Sharp under oath here in Cleveland and said, Judge, I was going in 40 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and I was really going 40. That's a lie, but if I was president, I wouldn't be impeached for it. You got to lie about something that has to do with the state.
So you're saying
not your romantic life.
You're saying
you have to lie about something that has to do with the affairs of the state, not the affairs inside your marriage.
So in other words, wait a minute.
Yeah, because it's high crimes and misdemeanors. That wasn't a high crime or misdemeanor.
Let me ask you a question. You're saying then that an employee, a woman employee who was brutalized by her employer, sexually harassed, she didn't have any rights. Is that what you're saying?
Nobody said that.
So now John
she
Wolf
got
is saying, ladies, if your boss sexually harasses you, forces you to perform sexual acts on him, you don't have any rights.
You're lying again.
You don't have any rights, according to John Wolf.
He never forced him, and she got an $800,000 settlement. Even she says it was consensual.
And then if your boss goes in and lies in federal court, according to John Wolf, it's not. It's not perjury.
No, I didn't say it wasn't perjury. I just said it's not a high crime or misdemeanor.
Well,
now I'll tell you the whole.
I guess a woman who's been abused
on his income tax return, but he didn't report as a asset the stuff that he built onto his San Clemente house. He filed false returns himself in 1973 and 1972.
John,
but the Democrats didn't even think of that.
Bill
It's
Clinton,
impeachable. They didn't think so. The precedent was set. It's been consistent.
Sat in a federal court, was asked point blank, did you have a sexual relationship with this woman? And he said, I did not. He blatantly outright lied in federal court under oath.
I don't think that was the actual exchange.
Can he practice law on the Supreme Court anymore? Can he practice law in Arkansas? No, because the Bar Association disbarred him over what he did.
All right, let me ask you.
But is that impeachable? I agree it was wrong, but it's not impeachable.
Let me ask you another question.
People lie about fidelity every day in court. Go to court on Monday and you'll see people lie about whether they've committed adultery every minute. Go ahead.
We got, we turned loose the 5 Taliban soldiers. And we got, excuse me, we got one soldier back, and whether he's a deserter or whatever.
Oh no! According to Susan Rice, he served with honor and distinction.
What should we do about the guy who made the wrong turn at the Mexican border? You think we all just sit here and do nothing?
What do you do after you made the wrong turn?
He immediately called 911 and said, "I've screwed up. I've made a wrong turn. Help me. I've got 3 guns in the car."
He explained that he was there.
Well, he should be freed. I mean,
John Kerry was in Mexico and couldn't even mention it.
I don't like Susan Rice, okay? I wish she wasn't in the State Department. You know, she didn't tell the truth about Benghazi. I mean, I'm all for, the Benghazi investigation.
I haven't heard Obama say one word about this poor guy.
John Kerry met with the Mexican foreign minister in Mexico and didn't even bring the guy's case up.
Yeah, it's time for Kerry to go.
And he's being tortured. Yeah. In that Mexican prison, he's being tortured and abused as we speak.
Well, we've run out of time, guys.
Well, we don't have to. I mean,
by the way, one of the environmental groups has admitted that they lied about the polar bear numbers because it made good policy with the press.
What's her name in Alaska? Did she come up with that one?
No, that was actually, they came out this week and said that they basically underrepresented the numbers because that's what the press wanted.
I'm going to ask you one quick thing before we leave. Minimum wage in Seattle, $15. Obama wanting to raise federal minimum wage $15. You for or against, John Wolf?
I'm for it. I think that's probably a little bit much. And I think what you need to do on stuff like this is gradualism. Instead of going from to me, it just seems hard on business to go from 8 or was it $7.25 now to suddenly to $10.10.
You got people that work for you, right?
Well, I pay them more than.
But are you admitting that it hurts business?
But would you like to go up 40% on what you pay them overnight?
No, I think it needs to be phased in. That's what I'm saying. You got to do this stuff incrementally.
Are you admitting then that it hurts business to do it?
No, because people have more money.
Then let's go to $100.
Because a Big Mac.
Then why don't you just go straight to $100?
Well, we'll see what happens in Seattle. I mean, that's going to be interesting.
Let me give you an anecdote. Nancy Pelosi argued that minimum wage increase did not hurt business, and then she quietly slipped a provision in that excluded American Samoa from the last bill that they put forward. And you ask, well, why would she do that? Because Starkist Tuna, which is headquartered in her district, has their main processing plant in American Samoa. So while she's the leader of the Democratic Party and is arguing that minimum wage increases don't hurt business, she's protecting a business in her own district because she knows it does hurt business.
But we got to remember too, it's going to create an overall demand.
It's going to cost 500,000 jobs.
According people will have more money to buy products.
500,000 people are going to lose their job. But what are you going to do for them?
No, that didn't happen the last time. Those job losses have never happened when they've predicted them.
That's not
when
true.
There's been minimum wage increases.
That's not true.
Every time the economy's grown.
That is not true.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true.
If you have $16 an hour to spend and it's $8 an hour, you hire 2 people. When they tell you got to pay $9, you don't hire 2 people, you hire 1.
Well, that's yet to be seen. We'll see how it fares. But so far, that hasn't proven true. But I agree, it's not right to go up 30 or 40% all in one fell swoop.
But my point is, if it doesn't hurt business, why would it hurt to go up 30 or 40?
Well, because at some point,
because it does hurt business.
No, because
it hurts business.
Every increment has a different effect.
Because it hurts business.
Not every bit of increase has an effect. Stuff in this economy. A lot more color people are too.
We've got to go, but I've got one last thing to say. A liberal is someone who thinks Fox News lies, but Obama doesn't.
Well, I think they both do. How about that?
A liberal is someone who thinks Republicans have a war on women, but the Muslim world doesn't.
I think they both. Well, you can't. Yeah, they both do, but just a very minor war by the Republicans compared to, and not all Islamic is the same. You can't paint them with one brush.
Bye. We'll see you next week. And John Wolf, we'll see you next week. He'll be back with us.
I'll be here, bud. Too early though.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.
You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece.
So, anyway, when you were young, you do some things, and when you get older, you still do some stupid things.